All right. Welcome, everybody, to our session on how we got our MDM project funded. I'm going to introduce our speakers here in just a second, but let me talk for a moment about why this is even an important topic. Obviously, you're buying software, you're allocating enterprise resources and human effort, as well as compute effort and things like that to this investment. So it's something that's going to need to be agreed to and signed off and approved within the organization. I think that's pretty obvious to everybody. We do find that the level of thoroughness of the justification really it correlates very strongly with the success of the project overall. Because if you don't take your time right at the very beginning to sort out what it is exactly you're trying to do, how you're going to do it, and what success looks like, then the chances are that you're just less likely to achieve whatever that success ought to be. So I tend to think of this as level 1 and level 2 type justifications. A level 1 justification would be, it nearly always starts with, well, we just need better data. And then the questioning goes, well, what are you going to use that better data for? What outcomes it going to have on the business? And nearly always we can get to, well, we want to use it to optimize our supply chain, or we want to democratize access to data so that citizen analysts can look at customer interactions and, that kind of thing. If that's as far as we get, that, some people, a surprising number of people, candidly, get funded based off of identifying a use case, but not really doing the math and the real impact analysis around it. And so, you may get funded, you may get started, you may struggle when you get to the implementation pieces. And, the day comes when you need to a renewal or something adverse happens in the organization, there's a CapEx freeze, you might be the one that's most likely to get the CapEx freeze because the impact of what you're trying to do was never really all that clear to people in the first place. So that kind of leads us to, well, what would a level 2 justification look like? Level 2 justification would be not only identifying directionally, here's what we're trying to do, but it would be putting some real numbers and math and metrics around what that thing is. We not only want to look at our inventory levels, but we want to reduce them by X%. And because of the cost of and the X% in dollars of inventory equates to how much in working capital and interest rates, et cetera, we can do some real math on what the actual fiscal impact is to the business if we get that right. And if you can't get to the detailed numbers, you might get to, there's a strategic project in the company, initiative, the word I was looking for there. There's a strategic initiative that we're trying to support, which is to allow enterprise analytics and real-time analytics on X, Y, and Z. And if we can't get that right, then some other much bigger thing starts to fall apart. If you can identify a very, very clear chain of responsibility of impacts, then that might be sufficient because the level of impact you're going to have on other strategic things. But those are the kind of things that would make it a level 2, in my view, justification rather than a level 1. I would say, by way of introduction to my good friends here at Mativ, John, Luke, and Casey, I would call what they've done a level 2 plus, and I think you'll start to understand that when we get going. So let's introduce our panel here, and we'll get into the conversation. I will start with Lawrence. Why don't you just say hi for everybody? Then we'll get to the Mativ guys, and then we'll dive in. So Lawrence, can you just introduce yourself real quick?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Lawrence Young. I'm a value consultant at Prophecy.
Excellent. We'll talk more in detail with Lawrence in a second, and he actually worked with Mativ on their justification. So Mativ guys, let's start with John. Luke, can you tell us just a little bit about what you do and a little bit about Mativ?
Yeah, my name is John Luke Davila. Work here at Mativ. I lead up our master data capability here on the business side. And so Mativ is a leader in global specialty materials. We're based here in Alpharetta, Georgia, but we got global sales and operations. We have sites across the globe that are working to make the products we get out to our customers. So been helping lead up here our master data in the program, stretching across the company into multiple different areas.
Excellent. And Casey, your IT partner, how can you just introduce yourselves or yourself rather, and what your role is in all of this?
Yes, of course. Hi, my name is Casey Fortenberry. I'm the IT Business Relationship Manager for Supply Chain. So as the IT Business Relationship Manager for Supply Chain at Mativ, really act as the IT strategic partner for the organization. So my role involves aligning with the strategic goals of supply chain, guiding the business, and understanding how technology can support these goals, and then finally delivering the technology platforms that allows the organization to achieve their objectives.
Excellent. I think it's probably worth just clarifying a little bit because, Jean-Luc, you roll up into the business function, which I think was supply chain on operations, and Casey, you report up into IT. So is that how Mativ always does projects like this? You have kind of a business IT partnership, or is what you're doing here kind of unique?
Yeah, I would say it's how we do things now. So it wasn't always that way. So as we merged into Mativ, we really set up that partnership between IT and the business. So each of our business functions have a BRM resource that really helps drive these projects forward.
Excellent. Did that have a significant impact on how you went ahead and got the justification?
No, I think it helped us in defining this project. And eventually, yes, getting justification. I think as you have a partnership between IT and the business, it really did help us define what the project was. We had really good support from the IT perspective as well. And as we got our business case developed, we already, socialized this throughout the organization. I do think it helped.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think as we went through and having that strong partnership from IT and data, it stretches people, process, and technology. You can't do one without the other. So making sure that from the start, we were kind of a joint effort going through that helped make sure we didn't develop any roadmaps, proposals that were, just centered on one piece and ignoring the others. So it's been great to have that partnership on the IT side.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm sure Lawrence has seen the same kind of thing. But to me, if you can't identify not just a business stakeholder, but a strong engagement from business to IT, then you're going to struggle from the outset. I don't want to say the weakest, but the justifications that don't stand are the ones where IT is doing it in a silo and doesn't have a strong relationship with the business, I think. Okay, so can you describe a little bit about, just for context for everybody, before we get into the actual justification stuff, what was the business problem that you were looking at? What was the reason to even establish this partnership and start thinking about it and start thinking about how to do a justification? What was the core business issue that you're looking at?
Yeah, I would say from an IT point of view, one of the biggest, right, is as we became Mativ, right, through mergers and acquisitions, our ERP landscape for a company our size was quite impressive. We had 15 different ERPs, and you can imagine with data being in 15 different ERPs, none of them connected to each other. There were a lot of inefficiencies around processes and master data, which is one of the reasons why this project kind of took shape.
Impressive is an interesting word to describe that, I think.
For sure.
It's complex and tough, but yes, you can call it impressive. And from the business side, Jean-Luc, what's your kind of interpretation of that whole impressive landscape?
Yeah, so you can imagine with that landscape, doing anything to try to unlock some business efficiencies or to really transform the business, we really need to take a look at that data. And so I think post-merger, given that our desire to really drive different efficiencies across the company to start enabling the benefits of that size, we knew we needed better data and we needed to have good, accurate understanding of that data. So I think with that, we knew if we wanted to do anything else, we had to get these foundations right. And so we spent that first year really focusing on getting that master data, getting it understood, standardized, and improved, so that now as we look at any other projects and efforts down the road, we have that foundation to build off of.
Fantastic. So we'll get into the details of what your justification actually looked like in a second. But because you had to, there was M&A and there was recognition that there was impressive level of complexity there. There was, I think you called it a project called One Mativ, or an initiative called One Mativ. Broadly speaking, when you're getting into your justification, were you able to just say, this is part of One Mativ, that's a strategic initiative, therefore we have to do it? Or did you have to go to a much more granular level of ROI percentages and math and metrics? I mean, presumably there was a bit of both, but where would you say the emphasis was in your particular world?
Yeah, so Mativ, our leadership rolled out this vision of One Mativ across. So we wanted to act and interact with the world as One Mativ. How we got there was, a collaborative effort across multiple teams in the company. So we couldn't just say, oh, this is One Mativ and everything magically happened. But we did use that as a kind of a guiding principle as we went through this. So when we were looking through data, when we were working with other teams, everyone kind of had that shared sense of here's one of the reasons why we're doing this. Here's why we're asking questions. Here's why when we point out that we do this 12 different ways, it helped provide that coverage and support around why are we doing this. Now it's up to us to prove that doing this will actually result in that, and that in this area, acting as One Mativ will actually lead to these types of benefits.
Okay, so if I could just summarize that back, see if I get it right. One Mativ gave you a direction that everybody in the company already understood, so it gave you a context for the whole conversation, but the justification conversation was way more detailed than that. True?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so let's talk a little about what some of those benefit areas and metrics were that you identified, and a little bit the process on how you got there. So I think there was 3 broad areas. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, so I think when we were starting this, we met with a wide variety of stakeholders, and I think quickly we started to see opportunities pop up. With master data, there's no way they can't pop up across multiple areas of the business. So we knew we needed to start grouping or focusing those benefits in a few areas so that we didn't just spiral out into trying to solve everything. So as we started to get those, we really found those that had some of the highest benefits that we could really measure and drive across the company. And they really ended up in working to reduce inventory, working to increase and unlock cross-selling and other selling opportunities, and to really improve the efficiencies in different key business processes across the company. So I think those 3 areas were ones that we thought we could drive substantial benefits in, and that we really started to focus and group those use cases under.
And to be clear, getting into the inventory reduction versus cross-sell, presumably you're getting into quite different master data domains, and you're kind of pushing forward on multiple domains simultaneously. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think we started really on that traditional supply chain side and looking at those opportunities. But when you're talking about your items, that spans the entire company. And I think we quickly saw that the methodology and approach to doing this really could be applied in multiple areas. And there was that support as we started looking at those opportunities. And so we now really support every part of the business through master data.
Fantastic. Just a quick aside, a lot of people, a good few years ago, I think, in the dim and distant past of MDM, it was kind of viewed as one domain at a time, and we're just going to do customer, and then maybe a few years from now we might do product or whatever. To be clear, that was never your perspective. You didn't feel limited that way. You were more around, let's identify the business benefit, and then we'll figure out what domains are involved in it. Is that accurate?
We had a sense of the domains that we knew. I think when you're a manufacturing company, there are some that are going to be extremely important and could give us guidance, so we didn't just open the floodgates. But as we started looking, we did not go into these sessions or meetings with folks and say, here's this specific data attribute, tell me what benefits happen here. We really just took a step back and worked. And from there, we then said, okay, here's the type of data, here's the domain of data. And in some areas, when we look to implement, we may need to group things, but everything is structured around the combination of how that data interacts across the teams.
and the impact it's therefore going to have when you put it all
Yeah,
together.
Martin, also, it's important to note, so we understood that this project was transformational for Mativ, right? And that there are other projects that are going to rely on the master data that's coming out of Prophecy to be successful. So we knew there were other things downstream. And so part of that also was that we knew that we needed item, customer, vendor relatively quickly to support these other initiatives as well. So we did have a roadmap. And so we're kind of executing to that as well, knowing that there's an end state and that this all builds on each other. So I think that's important to note as well.
Perfect. Can you just give for the audience some indication? I know you're probably not able to use actual numbers for confidentiality reasons, but an indication as to the level of depth that you went into in any one of these use cases, just so that someone would say, "Oh yeah, that's what I'm doing," or "Oh my gosh, that's not yet what I'm doing."
Yeah. So, I mean, we did go down to the numbers, and we'll talk about, we worked and leveraged the support of Lawrence and the Value Consulting, but we did get some top-down numbers that ended up getting committed to. And so we have specific dollars, specific inventory amounts, specific processes and hours that we are trying to save and free up. So I think we got to some very clear specifics. We did focus those in certain areas, and I'll take maybe inventory as an example. We made some commitments, and now we are working through making an improvement in the data, focusing on that process, and actually going through, pulling out examples, use cases, and where we can, reporting to show very specific inventory adjustments that were enabled through the master data improvements. Now, the full amount, won't always be tied to a specific inventory movement, but where we can show and paint some of the examples and tie those use cases to actual adjustments, I think it goes to show and gives us guidance on what areas are working and we should focus more on, and what areas we're not seeing as much, so we should stop and focus in the other areas.
To be clear, in each one of the areas, you had a target benefit measured in dollars that was made up from metrics and percentages and a calculation, and you had a cost. So you had an actual ROI per area that you've actually signed up to.
Yes.
Which, by the way, by itself is quite impressive. One of the reasons that I said 2+, I think, in your justification is you actually went ahead and signed a document that said, "Here's what I'm signing up to deliver," and that was very persuasive in terms of getting the justification done. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think our teams, signed up. We knew where we thought we could see those benefits, and we have, committed our teams and the broader business to that. And I think we've gotten that support, and other teams as well are committed to those same benefits and have been instrumental in helping us actually see and realize those, so that this isn't a data has done some data things and everyone else may or may not take advantage of it to actually see the benefits.
So one more question around that level of kind of thoroughness and planning, and then we'll pivot more to the process of how you got to all of that. But how has having that level of a detailed, thought through plan that you and not just you personally, but your team signed up for, how has that impacted how you have engaged the project as you dug into it?
I think IT has been really helpful, and it's, Casey, you jump in if you think I'm wrong here, but Casey mentioned Mativ hasn't, maybe this isn't how we used to, but we've had this tight partnership now between IT and business. Every step along this project has not just been a deploy tools, do backend data stuff. That's it. We've taken step by step, tool and data, process improvement, tool and data, process improvement. And by having that plan, it's given us ways to evaluate, did the step we take actually do anything? If yes, great. And how do we lean into the part that we saw the most benefit realized through? If not, should we take the next step? Do we pivot? Do we do it a little different? So I think going in with that plan and measures has given us a mechanism and a guide as we go through this to make sure that we don't just spend a year, 2 years doing technology things and none of the business teams are feeling like there was a benefit to it. We've said, hey, no, we deployed this. We deployed 2 dashboards that gave visibility around item, and we did some process improvements around item inactivation. We actually saw a whole lot more benefit around item status. Maybe we should look more at some of those efforts. So it's just having that structure really helps you as you move forward. Make sure that what you are doing and the trade-offs you have to make throughout the project are the best ones for what you're trying to accomplish.
So change management, real-time prioritization, any course corrections, all of those things are guided within the context of your original justification. So again, it was not just a justification, it was actually a really well thought through plan for how you're going to get to success. Fantastic. All right, so let's pivot now out of all of that, and we'll engage Lawrence a little bit here. Sorry for having left you on the side there for all of
It's
that.
okay.
How does one get to the point of having numbers and a complete justification that one would feel comfortable with actually signing up for the benefit? So Lawrence, why don't you talk just a little bit about that kind of broadly, and then we'll ask the Mativ guys to fill in detail on, in their particular case, how did that work out?
Sure. Yeah. So when you think about the justification, I really look at it as two different things, right? You certainly have the financial part, and those are the numbers, right? And we'll get to those, right? But the other part of it is more of the cultural aspect, or it's a very people-centric process. You want to get people excited about doing this. As a blended team, we're in the business of really creating champions. And how do you do that? You do that through respecting people. How do they feel respected? By making sure that they're heard. And so a big part of this is making sure that we kind of break down those barriers to communication, so everybody's on the same page in terms of what's happening, right? What's in it for them by us improving the quality of data that they work with from a day-to-day basis. And then when we get to the numbers, there are a couple of things that we can do. We speak with many people from around the business, and oftentimes they already have an idea in terms of their KPIs, where they want to be in X amount of time. And so that makes things a little simpler, but it's not always that easy, right? Sometimes you have to ask follow-up questions and get people really thinking about what the impact of their data situation today is on the business or on their part of the business, right? And so in that case, we can maybe get to some numbers that we can plug into some financial models that we create based on their bespoke use case. But other times, Martin, you mentioned earlier, engaging me because of the experience that I have in doing this. So I think with Mativ specifically, there was one part of it when we were looking at the inventory on hand and trying to forecast what the excess inventory is. There's not always a clear answer on what the excess inventory is, but using my experience from working with another manufacturing company that was in a similar size, I was like, well, they were able to pinpoint 20% as being excess inventory, so maybe we can use it here in this financial analysis, and maybe it seems real, right? Or maybe it seems suitable for us. And so getting to those numbers, it's a bit of a science, right? Because if you're a publicly traded company such as Mativ, I can look at your financial reports. But when we go a step deeper, we need to get information from the business. So that's where the art comes in, making sure you're asking the right questions, making sure people are thinking about this the right way. And then if they don't have the answers, which happens because it's not always easy, then making assumptions based on what we know from similar situations.
Right. So if I can summarize that back and tell me if I get it right or wrong, there's a whole process of stakeholder engagement, making sure that the people who are going to be impacted feel like they're engaged. I think that was one of the things that Mativ talked about earlier as being important. And the other was using that process to build out a set of financial models that then can be validated and used to drive an actual ROI. Is that close
That's
to
right.
it?
Yeah.
So then you're identifying. You need to go and identify who the stakeholders are. Was that Mativ, for you, was that perfectly obvious who they were going to be, and were they willing to come to the table and have these conversations, or how did that process go for you guys?
Yeah, I think on the business side, we had the support, thankfully, of our now chief of supply chain operations officer, as well as our chief information officer. So we had some good leadership support there, as well as I think when you go into teams and they know that data is actually looking to help them. And it's always nice when you have a few use cases of some latest day pain that they had. Maybe that itself is not what's really the highest value use case, but when they know that you're listening and you've at least done some of your homework to know what is impacting them and their teams, I think we were able to start meeting with folks. And I think also between Lawrence having some ideas across for other manufacturing companies, what are some of the teams that can see benefits here? What are some of the ways in which they may help to sort of a benchmarking exercise? As well as, with Casey and on our T side, I mean, IT is very well aware of the data issues, where things are hidden and where maybe you should poke. So being able to partner again and have that from an IT side, I mean, Casey, I know you were able to kind of point out quite a few folks.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's always been a struggle on the IT side as well around master data. And so we were very much aligned with the need to move forward in this project from not only the business but the technical side as well, because we knew it was going to help both sides of the house. So, absolutely.
All right. So, real quick, Lawrence, could you just weigh in on, from your experience, on what's the sweet spot in terms of the number of use cases or benefit areas that people should look at all at once? How many stakeholders should you identify? How many stakeholder interviews? How long do they take? Just give a little bit of an idea of scope of what that kind of. I'm sure there's a low end and a high end, but what's sure, the Goldilocks sweet spot for you?
So, general rule of thumb for number of use cases or benefit areas, we look at 2 to 4. The reason being is that when we produce this assessment, we don't want to overwhelm people with too much information. We want to give them the most impactful things that we've identified within their business that can be affected by doing this project. From a stakeholder perspective, and this is where I think John, Luke, and Casey don't give themselves enough credit. They were very thorough with putting together a list of stakeholders to meet with. There's really no hard and fast limit in terms of how many stakeholders we have. I think we met with, I want to say somewhere like 14 groups, which to me is awesome because everybody had a voice, right? And so, John Luke was instrumental in identifying those people around the business to say, hey, we need to speak with these people. And, he and I would talk, to the side, and he'd say, hey, here's how I think you should approach with this part of the business or that part of the business. And then the same with Casey. Casey, and I would chat and we would talk about, hey, from an architecture perspective, I don't think these people understand this. And so here's the direction I think you should take the conversation. So I wanted to give them props for that, because that's important to have that foresight to know how to approach this, because this makes while we spoke with 14 different teams, this makes it a lot more efficient and easier to get the information that we have. So no limit on stakeholders. It's really what you feel is the most impactful for the business, especially considering the personas that are going to be working with this type of data that your project is going to affect.
One more scoping question. I'm sorry, go ahead, John Luke.
I was just say, as a core project team, and that one of the reasons when we talk about stakeholders too, the project team, we had representation in folks at all levels. We had our C-suite involved. We had the folks hands-on keyboards who are setting up those records in parts of the systems. And we had that full level, top down, bottom up on so when we went into those meetings, between that spread, we actually know quite a bit. We've seen a lot of indicators from teams on what they may or may not be struggling in. And when we can take that at all levels and bring that to bear, we could go into those conversations with the stakeholders, show that we had done our homework within our teams, that we had taken views within our teams into account, and then brought that into that stakeholder call I think folks were very excited when they knew, data and IT was that focused and willing to put that type of work into helping them solve their problems.
And I think it goes above stakeholders as well, right? So stakeholders is part of it, but it's also about socializing what you're trying to do throughout the organization. And we had a large number of stakeholders in this project, and some projects may not, but in doing so, all of Mativ was aware that this was a strategic project. They were well aware of it before we signed the contract with Prophecy. So that's extremely important to make a project successful, is making sure that everyone's aware of what's happening well before you start executing.
Yeah, that's. I think there's a couple of lessons to be pulled from that. One is you guys, the three of you, were all coaching each other. Mativ, you know what's going on inside your business. Lawrence, you know kind of places to poke and prod, but you were kind of pushing each other on all of it. And the other lesson learned was the extent of stakeholder engagement that you guys were jointly able to get, so that when the project starts, no one's surprised by it. No one's shocked that you're asking for money, and they're all happy because they're anticipating the benefits. So, all right, so we're almost out of time. I want to just wrap up a little bit with any thoughts for the audience online here on how. Well, first of all, it was a little while ago when you did this. How is the project going now in Mativ, and is there anything that, with hindsight, relative to the justification process, anything you do a little bit differently? And then, Lawrence, I'm going to, after that, ask you to talk a little bit about just general guidance for anybody who's doing this kind of thing. So, Mativ first.
So, I mean, as far as towards our committed business benefits, I think we are on track, and we've taken pivots as we've learned what parts were more successful and what parts weren't. But we are on track and moving forward. As far as from a business side. And so then I think from anything we would have done differently, I think we, if anything, probably underestimated once we got going how much the business teams and other teams were going to embrace and want to participate and kind of work with the project. So if anything, I think when we maybe it's a sign of the stakeholder engagement, but we did it. And now, if anything, it's, more folks want to participate and kind of work with us on those. And they always move faster and get it accomplished and see what else we can do. So
the lesson there is that success breeds success. And the fact that you started off well and got it moving, other people want to be part of it. So kind of plan for it to get bigger as you go, I think is that a decent summary of what you just said?
Much better.
Yeah. And Martin, and I'll add to that, Martin, I think there's some things that we found very successful in this project, right? I think it's early collaboration between business and IT. I think that's extremely important. You cannot do a project like this in a vacuum. So it can't be a business project without IT engagement. It can't be an IT project without business engagement. So having that early engagement and alignment is critical. And again, I can't stress enough, socialization early about the project and the benefits is key. When you get down to the point where you need ELT to sign off on a project, they need to be very well aware of what's happening before they get the document, right? And we did a very good job, I think, that holistically of make sure the organization knew what we were doing well ahead of time.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I'll just a final note. We're a little over time, but I want to give Lawrence the opportunity to sell himself a little bit. Lawrence is here in Prophecy. He's I don't want to say a person as a resource, but you know what I mean. A resource to customers and our sales team. So anybody watching here who is thinking about this and think they might need some help, you can reach out via your sales folks and see whether it would be appropriate for Lawrence to engage. But Lawrence, what would be your advice to anybody who is facing needing to do a justification?
So I think there are a couple of general rules of thumb. One is if you don't know who to involve in that justification, think about the people around the organization who are going to be opinionated about where you are currently in your data situation, and think about those folks that if you earn their respect and understanding what they're going through, they'll be champions for you. Those are the best people to involve, whether they're close to the data, whether they're working more strategically. So that's one thing. The other thing is
feeling the pain, in other words.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And another thing is when it comes to understanding, how this is affecting us, you're not always going to have all the answers. You don't have to have the answers. Sometimes we can make guesses based on industry specifics, based on things that we've heard, based on just general assumptions, right? And if we get it wrong the first time, there's a refinement process in this that will allow us to kind of debate those things that we think might be a little bit off and fix those. Like with Mativ, that's we had some refinement sessions like that to really make sure that we had a good story. And then finally, the other thing is, and it goes back to what Casey was talking about with socialization, with Meta specifically. One of the really positive things that we saw from this was when we spoke with stakeholders, you could tell they were getting excited because they would start to ask us to speak to other people too. So I think we had like additional meetings that we ended up having because they wanted to make sure that, this person or that person was filled in. And so they're already being champions just because they've been heard, right? They understand what's in it for them. And they understand that, we're going to go the extra mile as a blended team to understand their problems and try to help them overcome those problems.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry to cut you off. We're a little over time here, so we'll wrap it there. So hopefully what everyone has got from this is we all know that implementing MDM is not just about technology or software. It's about engaging the organization, which is what makes it challenging sometimes, but satisfying and impactful when it's done right. And I think what we heard from the Mativ guys here today is an example of when it's done very, very well. From my perspective, what you've done is exemplary. And I look forward to having you back in a year from now to tell us how ridiculously celebrated you are all across the whole organization for having had such an impact. And Lawrence, thanks very much for your time and for doing this for our customers all the time. So we'll stop it there. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time, and hope everyone got something out of this. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.